Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first session of the Divorce Support Club for 2024 with me and Fiona Griffin. I'll just ask Fiona perhaps to introduce herself first, if that's okay, Fiona.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and Happy New Year, if it's not too late to say that now. I'm Fiona Griffin, and I'm the team leader for the divorce and financial team at Walker Family Law.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Fiona. So just as a very brief introduction to the DSC, if you haven't joined us before, um, Ian Walker Family Law you're Walker Family Law, aren't you now, because you've
Yes,
rebranded.
we are.
So it just fell off the tip of my tongue. So Walker Family Law provide this extra service for their clients and anyone else who would like to learn more about the sort of emotional side of going through a divorce, to support their clients in a much more holistic way than they can do just by providing the legal aspects. So today we're going to talk about creating the blueprint of your life going forward. And I'm just going to share my screen so that I can introduce myself and the topic. You let me know when that comes, Fiona.
Yeah, it's there.
Perfect, thank you very much. So my name is Claire Macklin. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I'm a master NLP practitioner and I used to be a lawyer. I've been divorced twice now. Once very suddenly when my first husband left, and then the second time was my choice. So I've kind of been through this process from both sides, if you like. I'm also a single mum to two teenage boys, and the author of a book, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence. Now, the aims of the Divorce Support Club are to help you get back in control, really, of your life, to concentrate on you rather than on your ex. Because if you concentrate on your ex, that's where your energy will go. To become calm. So we talk about lots of strategies to get calm and to soothe your sort of nervous system going through this process, because it can be very anxiety inducing. To get clarity, and that might be about the legal process, it might be about financials, it could be about the things that perhaps scare you. To focus on what you can control, because that's where your power lies. When you can control the controllables and let go of some of the other stuff, that's when you begin to feel much more in control of what's happening around you. To see options and choices and to make really informed decisions, to communicate more effectively, and also to create your vibrant future. And that's what we're going to really talk about today. We had a previous session, which is also on the website for those people who are members of the Divorce Support Club, last January, around creating your vibrant life. So if you want to go back and watch that, that will have, it does have even more resources in it. It's got different strategies in it to the ones that I'm going to talk about today. So if you watch both of them, you'll have a really, really broad range of strategies and options to help yourself to start thinking about blueprint of your life going forward. So I know from my own experience and from working with hundreds of clients, both men and women, that it can be really, really scary facing the future after a separation or a divorce. There's so much uncertainty, and you perhaps don't know what your financial situation will look like. You perhaps don't know whether you're going to be able to stay in your home. Perhaps it's affecting your job. It may affect all areas of your life. And Tony Robbins talks about 6 human needs. I thought it might be quite interesting just to look at these, because it becomes very clear why divorce and separation are so traumatic when you look at these. So the first human need he talks about is the need for certainty. So that's the need to feel safe, to feel secure, to know what the future looks like. The second human need is actually variety or uncertainty. We also have a need for spontaneity and sometimes for change. And we need to have a balance between those two things, that certainty and uncertainty. And that balance will be different for everybody. We also need significance. And that's about feeling unique, feeling important, feeling heard, feeling seen. And then connection or love. So having a strong feeling of closeness with somebody else or something else. And then growth. So wanting to learn, wanting to be better, constantly wanting to develop. And the last one is contribution. So that's about giving, helping others, perhaps contributing to your community. The top four of those human needs are the very sort of personal ones that affect perhaps the way you look at the world and your personality. And many of our behaviours are driven by those needs. And when you think about it, when you're going through a separation or a divorce, um, some of these are seriously challenged. The balance between certainty and variety or uncertainty is really skewed. There's way too much uncertainty, not enough certainty. Your feelings of significance and being heard might be reduced, and certainly your feelings of connection and love may be diminished. And that's why it's so important, perhaps, to build up a really strong support network. So, looking at how you can take back some control and start planning for your future is really important. It's about finding certainty where you can. And that's why I talk a lot about taking back control where you can. If you look back to our previous sessions, we talk about that all the time. So many of the worries and concerns that I hear from clients are related to that uncertainty about the future divorce throws up. And these are some of the common themes that come up. Spinning thoughts and worries, lots of things swirling around my brain, and I don't know how to deal with them all. Overwhelm. I feel like I'm leaping off a cliff and I don't know what's underneath me, or there's nothing below. And some say that part of them is excited, but the other part can't bear the thought and is really frightened. Often, perhaps you don't know who you are anymore, or you feel rudderless and anxious, or perhaps you just can't imagine the future. You have no idea what it looks like. And many of my clients talk about feeling emotionally battered, but it's all just too uncertain. It's really easy, perhaps, to lose yourself in a marriage, to lose aspects of who you are as you kind of compromise and shift to being a part of a couple. And it's never too early, I tell this to my clients all the time, it's never too early to start planning and thinking and dreaming of what you would like the future to look and feel like. But even that question, I know, can feel really overwhelming. One thing I notice about all of the statements on this slide is that they're concentrating on what people don't want. And that's a really common human reaction as well, to notice what's wrong, to focus on what we don't want rather than what we do want. When we focus on that, what we don't want, that tends to be what we notice, what we experience, and it can then become the focus of our energy. So I'd encourage you to try and turn it around. So I often, having heard my clients talk about these kind of statements, will then ask them what they would like to feel instead. And then I get a whole load of completely different answers. So these are some of the things that my clients say they would like to feel instead. They want to feel choice. They want to feel peaceful and calm. They want to feel happy. They want to feel that they're in control of their lives and what it looks like going forward. They want to feel independent. They want freedom. Many talk about wanting to walk with their heads held high. They want to feel happy in themselves. And starting to think about the future can actually give you a magnet to draw you forward into perhaps being your old self again, or even creating a new version of you. To be able to make your own decisions, to find your own North Star. And many people talk about wanting to follow their gut instincts, and perhaps they realize that they haven't done that through their relationship, and to regain a sense of self. So instead of feeling like they're wading through treacle or struggling through fog, what they really want is a clear and a bright path ahead. And the image of that feeling of peace and calm or freedom or whatever it is for you means you can start to put your energy into that instead, into imagining how that would feel, into thinking about steps that you could take to start to get there. And when you put your focus and energy into thinking about what you could have, it's entirely different. So I really firmly believe I'm not what happened to me, I'm who I choose to become. And when you start to focus on what you want, you start the first steps towards creating that new you. However, I didn't always realize that, and I know that many of you watching probably feel that you don't feel that either. And certainly when I was getting divorced, it was sometimes difficult to look even beyond tomorrow. So as always, it's useful to break it down into chunks. So what I'm going to do today is just share some strategies with you and some questions that you can start to ask yourself to begin to create that blueprint of what life is to look like going forward. One of the first things we talk about a lot with clients is values. So I see values as they're kind of like the building blocks to read to designing your life. They're the things that really matter to you, the principles that you want to create your life around. And if you Google values on the internet, you will come up with all kinds of stuff. There's lots of lists of different values that you could choose from. There are lots of questions out there. So you could do some of your own research on this as well. But your values will affect how you live, how you work, how you feel, and how you behave. They are what motivates you, and they really influence your choices and decisions. When something that you value is threatened, you'll notice it, and you might feel perhaps anxious or awkward or angry. Everyone's values are going to be different because they're created by their life experiences, by the beliefs that you were perhaps taught as a child, and by the things that happen to you. So my top four values are freedom, exploration, and integrity and kindness. So I really enjoy being able to regulate my own day as a self-employed business owner. I really enjoy the motivation of booking my next holiday, going to explore somewhere else. I really enjoy finding out about new people, being curious about people and places. And I try and do everything with a sense of integrity. So I don't like to do things that feel out of alignment with my beliefs. And I like to do everything with kindness if I can. So some questions for you to start thinking about your values. First of all, just start really big. What really matters to you? What are the big things that are really, really important? And then what motivates you? So some people might be motivated perhaps by status or by financial security. Others might be motivated by making a difference or by learning and developing, or a mixture of all of those. What do I admire in other people? And also what irritates me in other people? Because we can learn a lot about our values by how we react to others and how they behave. So start to think about or start to look and notice behaviors in others that you admire or that really annoy you. And what I think about what that tells you about what you value. How might you do something differently to them, for example, in the circumstances that they're in? And then what do you want to be remembered for? So this is kind of a legacy question. What do you want people in 50 years' time to look back and remember was important about you? Your values can also change with time. So for many of my clients, one of the values that comes up is really being myself, because as you go through a divorce, um, that sense of self is kind of somehow threatened. It's threatened. You're no longer a wife or a husband. Perhaps your identity within the family has shifted. So being truly themselves comes up all the time when I talk about this with clients. Now, we don't always act in alignment with our values. Sometimes it can be difficult to act in alignment with our values. So it might be worth also thinking back to a time when you perhaps felt out of alignment with what you believe and you hold close. Because when you do something out of alignment, it can feel really difficult that you're doing something that just doesn't feel quite right, that doesn't sit well with you. So have a think about all of these things and come up perhaps with your top 3 or 5 values. And then what can you do with that? Well, you could put them up where you can see them. I have like a vision board on my wall, which has the visualizations of all the values that I hold really close. That helps me to keep my mind focused on what they are. And you can use them then in decision making. So, for example, if honesty is one of your top values, you could ask, am I being honest with myself right now? Am I honoring my values as I make this decision? And if freedom perhaps is one of your top values, you're trying to make a decision about doing something or not, am I going to feel more free or more restricted if I make this choice? And using your values as a kind of compass can be really, really useful. And then I just want to share a number of questions with you that can help you start to think about what you enjoy. Because as I said, when you're married, it's very easy to kind of get sucked into doing the things that your partner liked. And perhaps you didn't like them to start with and you've grown to like them. It can be really easy to lose sight of what's your interest and what's their interest. So some of these questions could be really good to sort of journal around, write in your diary, just free thinking about these questions. So what can I do now that I couldn't do before? So in my case, when I got divorced the first time, I decided I wanted to learn to dance and I went and bought a road bike. I couldn't cycle for 4 or 5 hours before that because there was always the children at home. Now I had weekends to myself, and I could also go and visit some old friends and things like that. So I've had clients who've taken up new hobbies. They've taken up perhaps hobbies that they weren't able to do or that their ex-partner didn't want them to do before. So what can you do now that you couldn't do before? And then what did I always fancy doing that my ex didn't? So do you perhaps love being on the water? Perhaps you enjoy paddleboarding and swimming and surfing, and your ex just didn't like those things. And so you haven't had the opportunity to do them. So now you can do those things. Or maybe you always wanted to go somewhere particular on holiday that they weren't interested in. Or maybe you like staying in and reading while your ex was always wanting to go out and socialize. Ask yourself what new things you'd like to try. Practice saying yes as well. So when people ask you to try something new, make yes your default answer. Try new things. You never know what you're going to like. And if you don't like it, you don't have to do it again. And then what do I already enjoy and want more of? Commit to doing some more of it. Do lots and lots of things that make you smile, that make you feel happy. And then ask yourself, what areas of my life frustrate me and what do I want instead? So this goes back to identifying the things that you don't want and then thinking about what you do want instead. What you do want isn't always the opposite of what you don't want. So try not to fall into the trap of thinking, well, I don't like doing this, so I'm going to do the opposite of that. It isn't always that's that kind of simple. Try and be really specific about what you want instead as well. So these questions are all around what you could do differently right now. They're focused very much on the present. So be really open to opportunities that come your way. Say yes to things. Because we often do things by habit. We do the same kind of things over and over again. And this can be especially true when you're part of a couple. As I said, perhaps you've lost sight of what you enjoy, what your interests were, what your likes are. So I would really encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone on this, even in small ways, and it can make a really massive difference. And I really believe that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. Even if it's something like, taking a different dog walk, getting a new haircut, trying out a different restaurant, perhaps going to a cafe or the cinema by yourself. Start small if those things make you anxious. Start small and build up because confidence grows with practice. I just want to tell you a little story about a client that I was speaking to about a year ago. And he had decided that he was going to try and meet up with some friends over the weekend. And he'd arranged a couple of friends to meet for coffee. And then at short notice, both of his friends cancelled their coffee date. And he said to me, I thought to myself, okay, what would I normally do? I'd probably stay here and I'd feel a bit miserable and I'd perhaps mope about my flat for a while. What could I do differently? Well, do you know what? I'm going to get up and go out. I've always wanted to go to this particular beach. It was somewhere in Wales, and he'd always wanted to go there. So he thought, do you know what? I've got an opportunity now. I'm going to go. And he went. He took his book. He read on a bench overlooking the beach for a while. And then he saw a woman walking along the beach and crouching down where the waves were breaking. And he thought, I wonder if she's all right. Went to ask her if she was okay. They got talking and they've now been together for 2 years. So things can come up when you least expect it. You never know who you're going to meet when you try doing something different. And then some questions more focused perhaps on things you might like to do in the future. So what did 20-year-old you dream of doing? So imagine yourself as that 20-year-old you. Step into those shoes. Associate into that what that 20-year-old you dreamt of doing or what they wanted. And wonder whether you can do any of that now. Or perhaps you can do some of that, but do it in a different way. And then flip it round. What would 80-year-old you regret not doing? So perhaps imagine yourself sitting on your veranda at 80, looking back at your life. You're warm, you're happy on the veranda, the sun is setting, it's warm on your skin. You can perhaps smell flowers, perhaps there's a soft breeze on your face, perhaps you've got a coffee and it smells delicious. You can hear the birds chirping, you can hear your breath. Imagine yourself in that place looking back over your life, thinking about all the things that really mattered to you. What were the important things? What were the brilliant things that you did that you're grateful for? And what advice might you offer to you right now that would be good to focus on? And then some more journaling questions again. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Allow yourself to daydream on this because there's an assumption here that you can't fail. So think really big outside the box. I remember asking a client this once, and she'd started with saying things like, "Well, I'm gonna go and chop down all the weeds and things in the garden." Within 10 minutes, she was talking about climbing Kilimanjaro. So when you allow yourself to really daydream and think outside of the box, if you like, think outside of any practicalities, you can start dreaming of some really big things. And then what do I need to let go of? What am I holding on to that I don't want to have anymore? And what do I want more of instead to replace it? Once you've answered all those questions, and you could probably fill up pages and pages, perhaps answering some of those questions, um, start to commit to taking some steps to bring some of those things to life. So about 2 years ago, I was working with a client who started talking about BHAGs. And I thought I had no idea what that was at the time. So I asked him what it was, and he said it was big, hairy, audacious goals. And this is kind of what I'm talking about just now. Think outside the box, think of things that are really big. Once you've done your daydreaming and unjournaled with all those questions that I've just had out, get yourself a big piece of A3 paper and brainstorm all your answers onto it. Put all your answers onto that piece of paper. And then pick maybe two or three of those different things that you want to do or be. And ask yourself, what will that give me? So, for example, if you answered, I want to learn to, I don't know, sail a dinghy, perhaps that will give you a feeling of exhilaration, feeling of freedom, a sense of adventure. Or if you want to travel to a particular place, perhaps that's going to give you a feeling of exploration or fun or joy. Or I want to get much fitter. I want to change my routine and get much fitter. Perhaps that will give you a sense of satisfaction, pride in yourself and in your determination. So identify what the thing that you want to do is going to give you or what it will enable you to be. And then start to identify 3 steps that you could take to start that journey off. So, for example, just taking that sailing example, number 1, I could find out if there's a local sailing club. Number 2, I could phone up the person who's in charge and ask them if they ever take any beginners out or if they've got a day where I can go and try it. And then 3, I could perhaps start to research some sailing lessons. 3 steps that are manageable for you to do. And then take those steps. Taking those steps will be empowering because you're taking action, you're doing something, and that will give you energy. And then lastly, what I wanted to do before I've got some questions for Fiona after this, but what I wanted to do before that was just share 4 stories from actual clients of mine who have done amazing things post-divorce. The first one up in the top left-hand corner is my client Katie. When I first met her, she was really anxious, quite newly separated. Her husband had left very suddenly for a much younger woman. She was in her late 50s and she was feeling really, really lost and very angry. And she was anxious about even driving to come and see me in my coaching space. And as we worked together over the following year or so, her confidence really grew. She took control of her finances, which she'd never done before. She travelled alone to Hong Kong to visit somebody in her family. She messaged me from the airport to say she'd just checked in by herself without anybody having to help her, and she was really proud. She took a massive promotion at work that she'd turned down before. And then last year, she retired and with her new partner, she set up a charity in Ghana, Compass Ghana, which provides palliative care to people over there. An absolutely amazing journey in the space of 4 years. Another decided to walk the Camino de Santiago. She had been inspired by watching the movie The Way, so she researched the route. She started training with a local walking group. She booked her tickets, and in 2022, she did it. Another decided to do something similar and walked from Ullapool to Cape Wrath, which is apparently a really challenging walk. She did it last summer, almost exactly a year on from the date on which her marriage had broken down. And she said it left her feeling really empowered. And then another discovered a new love for photography. So she specializes in taking photographs of wildlife. And she entered a global competition for wildlife photography. And out of hundreds of thousands of entrants from all over the world, she got into the final with this picture of a Gannett family. It's kickstarted a whole new way of life for her. It's brought her lots of followers on Instagram. She's been interviewed on the television. It's amazing how just taking up this new interest has totally changed her life. And then lastly, the Block Printing Boutique is a company set up by another client of mine. They make duvets, clothes, shoes, and these mugs, which I own. These are pictures of the actual mugs in my cupboard, with affirmations on them, all done through block printing. And again, another business completely set up from scratch, post divorce. So there is hope. That's the message that I really want to give you today. There absolutely is hope. There is a brilliant life waiting for you out there post divorce. It's just waiting for you to go and grab it. So, oh, there's so much to talk about on this, I think, Fiona. But one thing I'm really interested in hearing from you is whether, from a legal perspective, is there anything that you'd like to add into this discussion? You know, perhaps you've got clients who are in the middle of financial negotiations and so on. What are the kind of what's the advice that you would give them in this context?
I mean, there's so much, isn't there, as you say,
Mm,
Claire, and as you were talking, different things were sort of firing off in my head as well as to, all the different stages as well that clients are going through, because it is a real process from beginning to end. And it's lovely to think about, people who finished that process and are now getting on with their lives in really positive ways. Um, the first part of the talk made me think about when I initially see clients for that initial appointment. Um, and, they are stuck in that really uncertain place. And I think my first comment would be don't bury your head in the sand. If you are separating, even if you don't feel quite ready yet to face the challenge of that, come and have some initial legal advice. You're not going to lose anything by that. And so often people will
mm,
say to me, just at the end of an hour, I feel so much better, because we can untangle some of the things that they're uncertain about often in an hour.
mhm.
In that initial meeting, we can often tackle some of the big things that they're really uncertain about and start to help them break all of it down into much more manageable chunks.
Yeah.
So,
That's a
uh,
really interesting point. One of the big things that I hear clients say as well is not understanding the process, the divorce process itself. And that's one of the things, I guess, in your initial hour that you can reassure people about, you know,
absolutely.
exactly what that road looks like.
Absolutely. And you talked about, the need that we all have to feel seen and heard. And I think that's something that people should be getting as well from their family law professional. If you are currently working with somebody and you don't feel that, then they may not be the right family lawyer for you. Now, we can't always tell you good news. Sometimes we have to tell you difficult or news that you may not want to hear, but you should still be having your concerns listened to, even in that context. But the whole process, interestingly enough, and perhaps contrary to what you might think, the whole process of resolving financial issues on divorce is very future focused. So even though we ask clients to provide us with information, almost historical information, or where their finances are at a given point, which obviously will soon become historical, what we're actually looking at and what the court is looking at is what both parties' needs are going forward. So we do ask clients to think about what their financial future is going to look like in the context of their financial now. Obviously, we can't give you necessarily the future that you thought you were going to have whilst you were married, but we ask you to dream and think about what your future is going to look like within your financial circumstances. So we look at housing needs and how those might be met, look at working with you towards financial independence. And for those clients who may have had a career break, to support a family and are now going through a separation, we do ask them to think about, what are their future, what would their future work life look like? Does that include, for example, a period of retraining? What have they always wanted to do? Now, funnily enough, going through a separation is actually a, a time at which you can afford to take that break and say, actually, what I would like to do going forward is X, and the retraining is going to take me this long, and all the rest of it. So it is an opportunity to almost start with a clean slate.
Mm,
And look at all those things within the context of your financial circumstances. And that's why having, often we work with financial planners as well and pension experts. And that's really important because we want you to be able to look at the totality of your financial future and to put you in control of what those finances are going to look like for you. Um, so
yeah,
yeah, there's lots in there about the
yeah, there
future
really is.
focus of financial work.
Yeah, and I think, some people make the mistake of thinking that they need to take that financial advice once they've got their settlement agreed. I always say to people, no, let's bring in financial planning much earlier than that so that you can work out exactly what any kind of proposal looks like, or what or some of the options look like 10, 15, 20 years down the line into the future,
Absolutely.
and it can help you then make the decision in your negotiations. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really important point.
Absolutely, because your family law professional is there to give you those choices.
Mm,
Often there are two or three different paths that we can take with your case, but only you can choose which path you're going to have, and we're there to give the advice, but we're not there to make the choice for you.
mm.
We're there to give you the help and guidance to make the choice that you wish to make.
Absolutely. And then it becomes really important to get clarity on what those different options and choices will actually look like for you.
Yeah,
And they're going to be different for you than they are, than they would for somebody else in a different situation. So yeah, having that team around you can be really helpful, can't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And when you come to into the future, I think it's often been said to me, no disrespect, but I hope I don't get to see you again. And I never take that, I never take that amiss because I
No, nor me.
totally understand people don't really want to find themselves sitting in front of me several years later. But
No.
there are some important points at which you might want to get back in touch with your family lawyer, and that's around new relationships.
Mm,
Because if I had a pound for every time that somebody told me they were never having a new relationship, I'd be on a beach somewhere and not sitting here with you, Claire, as lovely as this
absolutely.
is.
I'll be there with you.
And people do enter into new
Mm,
relationships, but um, yeah, hopefully they will want to protect what they have achieved in their independence. And so things like cohabitation agreements or even prenuptial agreements, if you are thinking of getting remarried, are so, so important. Particularly the prenuptial agreements. It's amazing to me that what a small minority of people actually think about or have a prenuptial agreement if they're embarking on a second or third or whatever marriage.
yeah.
I think perhaps I've formed the conclusion that actually the English are much more romantic than we're given credit for, because we seem to scare away from having those financial discussions at the outset of a relationship, and it's really important to protect yourself for your financial future. It's hard won,
Yeah.
and therefore you want to protect it. And that doesn't mean to say you're disadvantaging the other person. Even a prenuptial agreement, you have to make financial arrangements that are going to be upheld by the court later on and therefore have to be seen as fair. So we can discuss that if you're thinking about prenuptial agreements. But that's the point in time, where you do look us up again, hopefully, and think, actually, I do need to go and have a chat with somebody again.
No, that's really good advice, and actually coincides quite often with when my clients also sometimes get back in touch with me when they are looking at going into a new relationship and they don't want to necessarily repeat the patterns that they might have that they might have fallen into in previous relationships. They want to do things differently this time. They want to work out who they want to be within a relationship. And I think, once you've worked out who you want to be within your own life, by yourself, then often the people that then come into your life really fit well. And then you can start to think about who you want to be in a relationship with that person, whether that's a romantic relationship or new friendships or a new work, new relationship with a new company or with a new employer. And actually, to pick up on something that you were talking about earlier in terms of this being a good time to think about potentially retraining or doing something different. Um, one of the things that I talk about quite a lot sometimes with clients is, what skills do you have? What resources do you have? What experience do you have? Let's get a picture of all of that. And what have you then got to offer? Because especially if you've been out of work, perhaps you've been a stay-at-home parent for a while, something like that, or you've worked part-time and now you need to go up to full-time, whatever it might be. Sometimes you can feel a bit underconfident going back into that world. So, building up your confidence by thinking about what skills, what resources you have, and what your ideal day perhaps might look like, is a really good thing to do, to build up that confidence, to build up that sense of what you want your working life to look like going forward from here.
Mm, absolutely. And you talked in your talk about some of your clients who have gone on to into the rest of their lives. I don't often hear stories, where my clients have gone on to. As I say, they don't like to look back and see me waving at them, but I do have a few that I thought, oh yes, these are some quite nice ones. So I had a client who gave up his very demanding and professional career, and became a motorbike riding instructor, something he had a real love of and wanted to pass on to
Mm,
students. And another client of mine moved hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the southwest, and started with her dream job and new life in the northeast of England. So she had a real change of
mm,
circumstances, and moved away. And another client who was living in a property that in the end just was too large
mm,
for his lifestyle. And he settled in a two-bedroom apartment overlooking the sea, and decided to concentrate on music, which is something that he loved and hadn't always had the opportunity to do in
mm,
his relationship. So, I just wanted to add to your comment, Claire, really, that even from my point of view, I do see clients coming out of the other end, and that's what I can't promise them very much. The litigation and family law process is quite uncertain at times, I will admit, but what I can promise is that they will come out the other end of it.
mm. Yes, it will pass. It won't last forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, just to finish, I suppose it's really important to look at ways in which you can start to take control of that, not let it be in control of you,
Yeah.
so that you can create a life afterwards that you're really excited by and proud of. It's a great sense of pride. I certainly feel that a great sense of pride in creating a different life post divorce than what it was before.
Mm.
One of my mantras going through my first divorce was I don't want my divorce to define me. And now look what's happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, true.
In
But
a
it
way
is.
I never would have predicted.
Yeah, yeah, but it is just a period, it may be a period of two, a year, a couple of years, but it is just a period of life.
Mm.
Your it's not your life, and it's certainly not the rest of your life.
No, actually, a client said that to me only yesterday, and we were talking about the 80-year-old you looking back, and she said, from that perspective, this period of time in my life is tiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been 18 months, and compared to the other 80 years of that life, it's the blink of an eye.
Mm,
So it will pass. It doesn't always feel like it at the time, but it will.
definitely.
That seems like a good place to finish on, I think. So
Yeah.
hopefully today we've given you some hope and some motivation you know, that things absolutely will get better and that you do have resources to make that happen. And our next session will be on the 7th of February when Lauren and I are going to talk from memory. I think we're going to be talking about sort of dating, Valentine's Day, all those kinds of things. So we look forward to seeing you then. And thank you
Thanks,
very much,
Claire.
Fiona.
Thank you.